In the darkness of the night, the streets of the village were quiet. The moon was shining brightly in the sky, but Shani's heart was dark. She sat in her room thinking. Dad's harsh voice from the courtyard of the house was still echoing in her ears when she said that she would be married to such a man tomorrow, which she did not know. Shani was a dream girl from childhood. She loved books, she loved to draw, and she wanted to become something by reading and writing to make her own identity. But his father, Haji Tariq, thought it was all nonsense. He often said that daughters are the honor of the house. Their purpose is only to go from the father's door to the husband's door. Every time these words left a wound on Shani's heart. When the decision to marry was announced, Shani tried to refuse, but in response, she was only taunted and beaten. That night, he made a decision. She knew that if she didn't dare, her life would be nothing more than a grave. After midnight, he left the room. Her bag contained only 2 pairs of clothes, a diary and old bangles given to her by her mother. His feet were trembling with fear, but a fire was burning in his heart. He left the village and went to the city. The glittering streets of the city and the noise of the cars were new to him. She was alone, hungry, and with fear in her heart. But she remembered her old mistress, Mrs. Hina, who had once said that Shani dared to come to her in difficult times and reached her home. Hina Begum hugged him, gave him shelter, and said that from now on there is no need to be afraid. Shani started a new life. At first it was very difficult. The people of the city were strangers. It was not easy to get a job, and often she spent the night hungry and thirsty. But he didn't give up. He worked at school during the day and worked at small jobs at night. Every day a new resolution was written in his diary. She remembered her father's words and thought that one day she would prove that daughters are not a burden. The years passed. Shani diligently completed her education and became a lawyer. She began to fight not only for herself, but for all the women who were imprisoned in their homes, whose dreams were taken away by their parents or husbands. His voice began to echo in the court. His cases began to be published in the newspapers. People now know him as Shani Advocate, and not just Shani. Meanwhile, Haji Tariq in the village was burning with shame and anger day by day. People would now ask him, "Isn't this the same Shani whom you used to call disobedient? The same Shani who has earned a name in the city today?" Haji Tariq's pride began to break, but the stubbornness was still there. She still considered her daughter a rebel. One day, Zainab had to go to her village to fight a case. The same court, the same people, and the same father were in front. When Haji Akram saw his daughter in the court with the black coat and file, surprise and defeat were clearly visible in his eyes. When Zainab presented her case, she said, "Daughters are not a burden. They have the right to dream and live their lives. If you keep them in jail, they will either die or come out and make their own identity." The entire hall was jam-packed. Shani's words pierced through my heart like an arrow. Haji Tariq was seeing his daughter in this form for the first time, which they had been trying to destroy for years. His eyes were moist, but his pride kept them quiet. Shani looked up at the sky as he walked out of the court. She knew that her true vengeance had been accomplished. There was no blood, no screams. Only with his hard work, his success, and his truth, he proved that he is not weak. He didn't run away. He ran away and lived his life. Shani had now become a strong and well-known lawyer in the city. With his hard work, he achieved everything he ever dreamed of. Preparing for court in the morning, papers in the evening, cases in the night. She knew that if she stopped, she would be pushed back into the darkness from which she had fled. But in some corner of his heart, the grim face of his village and his father, Haji Tariq, always emerged. He was the one who imprisoned her, who wanted to break her dreams, and who she had to leave home for fear of. Shani often wondered if that moment would ever come. When Haji Tariq saw his success, he bowed his head. One day, a case came up in the city court that shook his heart. A girl was forced into marriage by her father, and the girl went to court. When Shani read the file, it felt like it was his own story. He decided to fight the case. The trial began. Witnesses were presented. When a daughter's dreams are shattered, it is not just an injustice to a human being. It is an injustice to the entire society, Shani told the court with full confidence. The people sitting in the hall continued to listen to him and praised his courage in their hearts. A few days later, news reached the village that the famous lawyer Shani was the same girl who had run away from Haji Tariq's house years ago. The villagers came to Haji Tariq and started talking about various things. "My daughter has made a name for herself in the city." Some laughed, some nodded in surprise. Haji Tariq's pride continued to burn, but somewhere inside his heart began to shake. Time went by. Then came the day when Shani had to fight a big case in the court of his own village. As soon as she entered the court door wearing a black coat, everyone looked up. Some were shocked, some were surprised. And at the back, Haji Tariq was sitting. His eyes fell on his daughter. Shani saw them. The heartbeat quickened, but kept faith in the face. The trial began. There was a strange dignity in Shani's voice when he began to make arguments. She wasn't just speaking in court. She was testifying about her past, her struggles, and her freedom. When he said, "Daughters are not burdens. If you imprison her, she will come out of the prison and make her own identity." So the whole hall was stunned. People started to look at Haji Tariq. The man who once considered his daughter weak now had his strength standing in front of him. Haji Tariq's face was still hard, but the corners of his eyes were moist. He couldn't speak anything. When Shani walked out of the court, she knew that her revenge was complete. She didn't defeat her father, but proved by her own existence that she had won. When Shani came out of the court, the villagers gathered around him. Some were praying, some were wondering, but he was the man behind it, which Shani had been afraid to see for years. Haji Tariq. He slowly got up from his place and moved toward Shani. His steps were heavy, like the weight of centuries. Shani's heart was pounding. Years later, the moment came. Father and daughter standing in front of each other. Haji Tariq looked at him carefully for a while, then said in a broken voice, "That's the life I wanted. Did not care about my honor. Bowed my head in front of everyone." Shani's lips trembled, but he held himself. She said in a strong voice, "I didn't disrespect you. I just wanted to live. I ran away and saved my life. If I had stayed, I would have died." The villagers stood in silence and listened to the conversation. Shani took a step closer and said, "You always say that. Girls are burdened. See, today, the same burden stands for justice in the court. The same daughter is giving respect to people." Tariq's eyes were red. They closed their eyes. For a moment, it seemed as if his strong shoulders were broken. "The sound is filled with, 'I don't know you,' your mother said. 'This girl is so courageous, and I just saw her stubbornness.'" Hearing this, Shani's heart began to shake with the wounds that had been inflicted years before. But now the wounds were no longer his weakness, but his strength. He said softly, "It was not my intention to take revenge. My revenge was to show you that a daughter is never a burden." The villagers were shaking their heads. Some had tears in their eyes. Haji Tariq slowly retreated, and for the first time, defeat and regret were reflected on his face instead of pride. Shani looked at the sky. He felt that his struggle was over. She was no longer just the rebellious daughter of Haji Tariq, but she had become an example for all the daughters who are afraid to dream. After that day, the people of the village often said, Haji Tariq's daughter, Shani, not only changed her destiny, but also taught the entire village that a daughter is an honor, not a burden. A few days after the court's decision, a new debate broke out in the village. People would say to each other, "Shani has done so well." Haji Tariq's daughter came out and stood in front of everyone. Some people were surprised, some were happy. But one thing came to everyone's heart, that it is wrong to consider the daughter a burden. The women of the village, who had been living quietly for years, were encouraged for the first time. Some girls started going to school secretly. Some women told their husbands that they would also teach their children. Shani's name had now become a beacon of light for all of them. One day, Shani came back to the village. This time she was sitting among the women of the village, not in the court. Everyone gathered around him. Someone was talking about his daughter's education. Someone was telling the sorrow of his marriage. Shani listened to everyone and said, "Don't be afraid. If I can leave my father's house and do all this, then all of you can also fulfill your dreams." Seeing that scene had a deep impact on Haji Tariq's heart. They stood at a distance, watching. There were tears in her eyes, but she didn't dare to approach her daughter. Many times he wanted to go ahead, but the wall of pride would come in the way. At night, Shani was sitting in the courtyard writing a diary. He suddenly came out of the door. When he turned around, he saw Haji Tariq standing there. His face was grim, though. He walked slowly and said in a low voice, "Shani, I considered the daughter weak all my life, but today you've defeated me. This defeat is my real victory, because today I have learned that a daughter increases respect, not decreases it." There were tears in Shani's eyes. For the first time, he saw his father's feet shaking. She remained silent, just touching the bangles, and remembered her mother in her heart. At that moment, he felt that his journey was complete. Vengeance was not taken by blood, but by truth and hard work. Then the village changed. Girls began to study, women began to speak, and men were also forced to think that a daughter should be supported instead of suppressed. People would often say, "It's all because of Shani's courage." Shani was no longer just a daughter. It was a story, a lesson, a revolution. And his father? He now began to raise his head instead of bowing, referring to his daughter. Time went by. Shani's success was not limited to the court or the village, but she was also recognized in the city as a courageous lawyer and the voice of women. His interviews began to be published in newspapers. People began to invite him to events. But it was the biggest moment of his life. The family. One day, Shani was invited by an educational institution to give a lecture. There he met a professor. Arif was a simple, understanding, and respectful man. When Shani met him after the lecture, a conversation began between the two. Arif said, "Shani, sir, after listening to your struggle, I am convinced that women and men are equal travelers. But I believe that a woman should live her life not alone, but also together." This sentence touched Shani's heart. Years later, she realized that maybe she could trust someone now. The two began to meet. Arif never teased her weaknesses, but appreciated her strengths. After some time, he expressed his desire to marry Shani. Fear was still in his heart. He remembered how the forced marriage had broken him, but then he thought that this decision was of his own will, not of anyone's order or coercion. That was the real freedom. He was full of support. On the wedding day, all the people of the village gathered. Shani decided that the marriage would take place in the same village from where he had run away one night and started the battle of his life. Everyone was surprised that she had returned to this place, but for Shani, this return was a sign that she was no longer a prisoner, but a winner. Haji Tariq was also sitting there at the time of the marriage. When the judge wrote the names of the witnesses, Shani himself said, "My first witness will be my father." The hall was jam-packed. Tears welled up in Tariq's eyes. He accepted the honor of being the first witness to his daughter's wedding by holding a pen. There was no longer the hardness on his face that once scared Shani, but now the softness and pride of a father was reflected. The marriage was completed. The women began to pray, and the men began to clap. And the girls of the village, who had been afraid to dream in secret for years, were now getting inspired by seeing Shani. On that day, Shani wrote in his heart, "Revenge has been fulfilled. There was no blood, no screaming. My revenge was to live the life I wanted, to make my own decisions. And today, along with our freedom, we have also found our happiness." Shani's story is not just about one girl. It has become a lesson for generations.